All right, let's go ahead and get started. When our commission composer for this year unexpectedly moved in June, I decided that I still wanted to do some kind of session on composition at the conference. And I think our next speaker is going to fulfill that mission just the way I'd hoped. Alexis Carrier is a composer, pianist, and student at the University of Montana, majoring in composition. Her work has already won awards from both the International Horn Society and MTNA. One of her pieces was recently debuted by the award-winning ensemble duo Alterity. Her former teachers include Marcia Pickering, Janelle McKenney, who many of you probably know in Billings, and our own Ken Christensen. Thank you very much, Alexis, for agreeing to speak today.
Hi, everyone. I'm so very thankful to be here. I honestly never thought that I would get the opportunity to speak at something like this, so this is really awesome. So just before I start, I just wanted to let everyone know that this presentation is geared a little bit more towards the piano side, more of the piano private teaching studio, but it's a basis for a lot of things, especially since piano is so vital to composition. And so I feel like it will transfer over really well, hopefully, but just wanted to give you guys a heads up. So the big question that you might be asking yourself is why? Why even incorporate composition into your studio that's already established with students that already have been playing for so long, or those who are just starting out? What is the excitement and the thrill of creating music? Well, composition is actually such a beautiful and achievable art. Not only do students get to be immersed in a new kind of creativity, like those who they are actually performing, the ones who wrote their repertoire, but they also get a new form of self-expression. And this form of self-expression comes straight from the mind of the students themselves, where in their own minds there are far fewer limits, and it's where the overall musical thought process can increase. Everyone has to start out small. Let me tell you, I had to start out small too. But each musician, performers as well, have the potential to blossom into a phenomenal creator. As Seymour Bernstein states, in order to recreate, we must create. So some of the benefits are students get to be immersed in the same type of creativity as those who they are performing, the ones who wrote their repertoire, just like I said. They receive a much higher musical understanding of musical concepts such as, and I'll let you guys read these, but on top of that, they will be able to perform pieces with a higher understanding of each composer's intentions, as well as each piece's structure, musical architecture, and overall imagination and storyline. So some quotes from Carol Close, who, her and her book I'll be mentioning very soon. They go far beyond their theory level through hands-on application. And this is a big one as well. They respectfully respond to detail in existing repertoire, which is huge, especially since they're already performing piano and everything. Now this is a question to ask for ourselves. Is it really feasible to include creativity as a vital part of the musical making experience without taking too much time away from the lesson? As she has found, and she has nearly 40 years of teaching experience, the answer is a resounding yes. And her book, I highly recommend to anybody because it dives into the process of composing, including the groundwork of a composition, compositional tools, mapping, refining a composition, and setting up lesson plans to achieve optimal results with stunning creativity, as well as how it saves time in lessons. And so I'll just pass this around. And I think it's actually available out there too, if you guys like to take a look. So this is one of the main points that I really want to hit home today, is the concept of the play in music. As musicians, we are players. We play music, we play on stage. We almost play a game of how deep can we dig into a piece and make it meaningful. But one of the biggest parts of the whole play concept that is sometimes missing is, well, actual play. It's one of the main reasons why we fell in love with music in the first place, and digging into the creative compositional side can really jumpstart and revive the life in our own playing and compositions. So the next big question that you might ask yourself is, where do I even start? So especially even students who are going into the university, they sometimes haven't had enough ear training to where they can hear what they're hearing in their mind and put it on the page. Connecting music with music is what I say. But one of the ways that you can start out, even with little kids, is 5-finger patterns. So with the 5-finger patterns, you can ask them, what do they look like? Have them not look at the piano, and then you play the piano and have them write it down. And this helps to start with ear training. In fact, exercises like this can actually be combined with theory training that they're already probably having in their lessons, which is really awesome. So a specific example would be the teacher tells the student which note they're playing on the piano. Then the teacher would play the first 5 notes of a specific scale, but without telling them what type of scale that they're playing, and have a student write down on the staff paper the 5 notes. They can vary note lengths to begin rhythm training as well, the teachers can. And this can eventually be done with all scales, and it can eventually be done with all notes of a scale. And if you want to get a little bit before that, you can actually also use similar folk melodies that they might already be familiar with and notate it, such as Jingle Bells, Mary Had a Little Lamb, things like that. So the next step are the rhythmic exercises. So you can perhaps begin with a book on rhythms and have them start reading it, then clapping it, and then finally writing it down. This is to help to make the connection between the rhythms and the notes on the page. Like I said, trying to figure out just that process of how to get everything that they're hearing in their head into a piece of paper. So a couple books that I would suggest are Basic Rhythm Studies and Winning Rhythms. These two are quite similar in layout, and it's for more just to focus specifically on single rhythms. And so I'll just show you. Sometimes it deals with 16th notes, quarter notes, eighth notes, just like that. And it doesn't even deal with the staff, so it's just really focused on the rhythm itself. But if you want to get a little bit more intense, I would suggest studying rhythms for more advanced students. So we actually used this book in advanced functional piano, and it gets into 2 very independent rhythms for the hands, and it gets really intense. But it really helps with the reading of the notes on the page, as well as being able to hear what you want to write down on the page as well for composition, which is super important. And I'll be passing all of these around as well. And this is just an example page for those who haven't seen the book yet. So it's just very, very simple layout, which is really nice. The next thing that you have to start small with is definitely melody. So you can have the teacher demonstrate the line of a melody, kind of like the 5-finger patterns, and you can ask the students, is it going higher, lower? But how can you tell? That's one of the big things. You have to be making sure that they are making the connection and how they can tell. And then you can have the students write the melody with you at first. And one of the really good ways to get a layout of the keyboard themselves for the students is from Wynne Rossi's Creative Compositional Toolbox. And this was created just by her taking a piece of notebook paper, flipping it sideways, writing a middle line, which represents middle C. Anything below the line represents below middle C on the keyboard. Anything above represents above middle C. And so it really gives you the contour of a melody, as well as how it's laid out on the keyboard as well, and how it goes higher and lower, and it's really nice. But something that you have to keep in mind too while you're teaching all of these things is how the students learn. Each student learns differently, and it's crucial to identify the optimum way of learning to use it to your advantage and to the student's advantage, because if you can finally figure out how each student learns and they can understand how they learn best as well, it really helps in lessons overall. It's a wonderful process. So the top three are tactile and kinesthetic, which of course has dealt more with the feeling of the piano, the muscle memory. And then auditory, of course, is the oral aspect of piano playing. And a lot of times this is actually connected to the kinesthetic side. A lot of times they'll feel the muscle memory with also hearing it. And then there's visual and spatial, which deals a lot more with just reading the notes on the page and the fingerings that deal with the piano as well. This is from Music and the Child by Natalie Sarrazin, and I highly recommend this to you guys just to look into it. It's an online text and it comes in chapters, and it really digs into the mind of the child and how to teach them most optimally, and as well as how to do improv and how to just get their ideas down on paper. It's a really good source. So the other step plays into the play in music again. So what you can do is you can put a recording device on the piano and simply just play. Work with some melodies, improvise. If a piano isn't available to the student, they can sing the melodies that they're hearing and then just record them. Digging into the process and recording the results are one of the most helpful first steps to take even before pencil and paper. There are others who can help you to notate everything as well, and I'll get to those names at the end. But the most important part is to simply get the ideas out. And this is one of the number one things that I want to mention when it comes to notation. There are endless amounts of possibilities to help them get their ideas out. But most importantly, if they can't get their ideas out on paper yet, record them. Even if they don't want to, it's a good idea. As I said, the most important first step is to get the ideas out, which is rule number one. And you can use non-traditional notation, especially in the beginning, and sometimes, depending on the style that you're writing in, actual regular notation is not always required for their pieces. And it still helps them to see something on a page that helps them reminds them of the idea that they had. Rule number two, write by hand first. So it's extremely important because sometimes the technology that we have gets students into a 4/4 grid box. And they begin to write what the computer wants them to write, which is in 4/4 bars, usually with quarter notes. And they stop hearing what they actually heard and just try to hear what the computer wants them to write. And so writing by hand allows all the ideas to flow, especially since regular notation is not always required, as I've said. Rule number three, allow the staff paper to fit your needs rather than you fit the needs of the sheet music. Because sometimes if a student looks at something like this, they have no idea where to start, and it is very scary. And sometimes it's scary even for people who have been doing composition for a while. So one of the ways that students can start out looks a little bit more like something like this. This is another contour idea for melodies, and this is actually one that I wrote. And sometimes it only just takes a couple notes inside of the contour to remember what it sounded like. So I'll just play what is in my head. And if you want to get a little bit further and get into the staff paper, it might look something a little bit like this. So this is actually something that I wrote when I was younger, before I even knew how to notate anything. And just from this prompt, I actually still remember how it goes, and I'll show you guys. Alrighty. So, rather than just staff paper, like I have mentioned, there are other ways that are a little bit more graphic that they could possibly get their ideas out. And it might look like something like this. This is also from Music and the Child, Natalie Sarazan, like I mentioned. And maybe perhaps the blue little squiggle line is maybe the phrasing that they feel in the piece. Maybe the little red lines that they see are maybe the rhythmic pulse of the piece that they feel. Maybe the green little fuzzy dots are a little bit softer floating sounds that they hear in the piano. And another example, maybe the little green circles are little orbs of sound that are increasing in intensity maybe. And maybe the boxes are also the rhythmic, dynamic sounds of the piece. Maybe the swirls is like a swirling climax that they feel at the end of the piece. And maybe the purple lines at the bottom are maybe little bass lines that are like scale-like, that are maybe coming up throughout the piece. And it can just jumpstart what they heard in their mind rather than just letting an entire idea go. It might not always be exactly what they wanted to write, but it at least gives them a start in how to get things out, which is really nice. And like I had mentioned, if they don't understand the layout of the piano and the staff, they can use the thing from Wynand Rossi. And this is actually a book series that goes through step-by-step guide for learning to compose. And it ranges from early elementary to late intermediate. And this example that I showed you is from the early elementary. And it has that form, but it actually gets into staff paper by the end of the book. And each book gives one compositional tool for every 2 pages. Each book has about 24 pages, and there's 6 books. So think about how many compositional tools that they'll have by the end of the series, which is really awesome. And it gets more complex as it goes on, and I just think it's a really good resource. So I'll pass these around too. So the big thing for us is in lessons. Oh, one last thing. I also want to show you guys what my writing used to look like. So this book itself goes from junior high to college. And so you'll actually get to see how my type of notation changed. And let me tell you, it's drastic. So the things that you can do in lessons is not that big at all. It's not that big of a difference. You can start out with just 5 to 10 minutes of lesson time to start out diving into this new imaginative musical palette, as well as giving home assignments, which doesn't take lesson time at all, and perhaps using only one technique at a time. And these techniques, you should definitely be using the ones that you're already using in your repertoire, because they're already working on it, which is really awesome. The other big thing, when they come back with their home assignments, is to be encouraging while also being instructive. It's good to give criticism in a positive, curious manner. For example, wow, that was like a really great melody. It had a storyline and it went somewhere. But what is a way that we can maybe make it just a little bit longer? How could we make the storyline go even further? And you can throw out some compositional tools for the students to try on their melody to get their creative juices flowing. But something that you have to keep in mind too, composition is quite a self-directed art as well. So make sure that you're listening to the students' input while developing their technique and musicality. And remember, they're learning both of these things through their piano playing as well anyways. So a question that I'm going to give you guys for myself is, as a composer who was not taught until college, how did my style, techniques, notation, and everything change as I went along? It grew, just like my piano skills. It had to be nurtured, used, and cared for just like piano. As I learned specific skills on the piano, it taught me another skill to use for composition. So, one at a time. When I learned how to do chords, that's exactly what I used in my compositions. Arpeggios, you betcha. When I decided to learn my first Bach piece, counterpoint, oh yeah. But much like how the music we listen to influences our playing style, as well as our musical interests, the music we play takes an extremely large role in how we compose as well. So, how can we make sure to utilize the pieces students play to their full potential for their own compositions too? So one of the best parts of incorporating composition into the lesson is the students' repertoire is already jam-packed with compositional ideas to work on and talk about. We need to be gleaning the techniques from the music we are learning. This can also include any of Lillian Reichert's tools for developing compositional ideas, which we'll get to very soon. And some examples that are found are in these pieces that I'll show you. So this one has compositional tools like 5-finger patterns, which is really great to start out with, sequencing, and repetition. Another one is called Paper Tigers, and this one has right hand and left hand imitation, repetition by octave jumps, inverted counterpoint, and plays with going between major and minor. And something that I just want to remind you guys is that all of these techniques are actually coming from a single piece that the students could be playing, which is really awesome because it's just jam-packed, even in one piece of music. And finally, is one of my favorites just because there's so much that is in this piece, even though it's just so small. This one has Alberti bass, which they could be using in their compositions. Great counterpoint, multiple melodies interwoven, repetition, and little right hand and left hand melodic things that are going on. So this is the huge list of Lillian Reichert's tools for developing compositional ideas. I'll let you guys take a quick look at it, but some of the ones that we've already mentioned are like repetition, sequencing, imitation, and some of my favorite ones that I like to do are inversion and retrograde, and then just simple things, just like key changes, which is really nice. So I have a surprise for you guys. Now it's your turn. So I'm going to show you guys an example. I actually just tested it out today. I promise you, I just wrote random notes on. I didn't even give it a key signature or a time signature. And I decided to integrate it and put it on top of each other. And I'll show you just with a small little example that is just, sometimes it just takes the leap just to go ahead and try the process yourself. So I'll show you the one that I did. So this is the original. And then the integrated one. And now I have the integrated part and the original melody playing together. Sorry. And that's just from one compositional tool. And so I want to try to write a little melody with you guys. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to have it in treble clef. And I'm going to ask you guys, do you guys want it in a key?
No.
No? No key. Okay. So do you guys want a time signature at all? A time signature? Anybody? Yeah? 9/8? Okay. So we're going to fill this 9/8 bar with music that you guys are going to write. So does anybody want to give me a note and its rhythmic value? Half note. Half note E.
I have to.
Can we make it a done? Okay, there we go. Can everybody see? I know it's a little small. Okay, we have a dotted G so far. Yeah. Treble C. Treble C? What value?
D and E next. 2/8 notes.
Okay.
What was your last one?
Yeah.
So I have dotted quarter note G and then eighth notes C, D, E.
E, let's go to the tricon.
What? And what value? Of chord? Okay. So we have 1/8 note left. Okay. Who wants to do it? Rest. See?
Silence is important.
That is true.
I love that.
All right. Let's see what you guys have. Oh. Sorry.
That changes everything, right?
many things that you can do even with just a small little melody that you guys can write. And the process itself is not as daunting as we make it seem. And it's possible to be teaching students as well as trying to dive into the process ourselves. And I just wanted to try to see what would happen if we wrote a melody together. And see, it's not that bad. And that's what I'm meaning by the play in music. Musical play, including trial and error, is one of the most important aspects of music. It's one of the reasons why we fell in love with music in the first place, like I said. We can't be afraid to allow students to be part of this process. Having fun and making mistakes is a huge part of the learning process for many things, and it's critical in order to improve, as well as consistently harnessing creativity. And let me tell you, it helps so much with writer's block, because I've dealt with that a lot, and this has just helped so much. This outlet allows a special form of self-expression that is not yet touched by adult supervision, while also recalling musical techniques learned as well as discovering new ones, such as a new chord cluster, a new harmonic progression, or a new voicing. Musical play is usually spontaneous and self-directed, with no predetermined response imposed by others. The tactile, visual, and auditory nature of musical play involves both mind and body and fosters expressiveness, imagination, enjoyment, and intrinsic motivation. And then that's from The Serious Business of Musical Play by Robin Trinick and Leslie Pohio. So especially with improv, it can allow a special connection to new music, the student, and the teacher, especially when doing improv duets. So a couple books that I would suggest are Pattern Play, and with this one, wait 1 minute, sorry. This one gives patterns and chord progressions to kickstart the improvisational process. And it also gives ideas for creating while also giving many accompaniment variations for hands to improvise on. And I'll pass this around as well. And the other big one is A Classical Approach to Jazz Piano Improv. So this one is a lot more complex and in-depth. It gives the student a different sonic world and introduces extended harmonies and tasty musical flavors. It sets out patterns and chord progressions to experiment with, as well as sample ideas to kickstart the process, gradually becoming more in-depth and complex. It even gets into walking bass lines, which is really cool for me, I think, giving a well-rounded outlook on jazz improv. And it looks like this. So the other big thing, I keep mentioning this, but whenever you improvise, whenever you're just doodling around, record the improv sessions. It's super important. And you never know what new ideas or techniques can come from it. And in fact, some of the ideas can turn into a new composition, especially if you're listening back to the recording. And I do have to say, there is a difference between improv and composition. Improv is a form of composing where the performer must recall their formal musical knowledge to compose on the spot, as well as attempt to explore new sounds and harmonies, while composition is an art where ideas can be explored in not so spontaneous, in-depth manner, if you so choose, with a strong sense of form, structure, and well-thought-out motives and their development. And some students may seem like doodlers, but it sometimes is the innate need to create beyond the music that they're playing. It allows a doorway into soundscape experiments and other musical imagery as well. Especially if they're just fiddling around, you could maybe ask them, what do raindrops, like what would you think raindrops would sound like on the piano? How about some little twittering birds? And it gives them an idea of maybe a character that they want to give in their own playing, and it doesn't require a piece itself. And it really jumpstarts the creative juices. It gets everything flowing. For example, I forgot about this. When I used to doodle, when I learned arpeggios, I learned the G minor one, and it was my favorite one. And it turned into actually my first official piece called The Battle of Silence, and I'll just show you a little bit of it. And I still remember that day in lessons when I was just waiting for my lesson to start and I just started fiddling with the arpeggios. And that's sometimes all it takes is just the playing to figure out a new composition. Something that I want you to keep in mind, though, is that musical play doesn't stop with younger children. And especially with the technology that we have, especially for like audio manipulation, there's a lot of times where the students that are older can go into a software like GarageBand, which is free with Macs, I believe, Logic, Pro Tools, which are a little bit more pricey, but they still give a good jumpstart for playing. And so what they can do is they can take just one audio recording from anywhere. You can record it on your phone and put it on your computer, and then all you have to do is just plug it in, drop it into the software, and you can play around with it. You can manipulate it in any kind of way you want. But what I'm going to show you is one that I did with just a wine glass sound. That was about 20 seconds long. And I put on my favorite little effects. And all it takes is like maybe 2 mouse clicks to get into these effects. And it's really cool. So I'll show you what you can do. That's the original. That's with one effect. There's another one. And my favorite. But that's just with effects. That's not even splicing up, taking apart the audio and maybe flipping it around upside down, anything like that. It's just with effects. And so it's something that's really neat that students can play with. And if anybody has questions on more of that side, I'm more than happy to take emails about it and just get a little bit deeper into it because we don't have as much time to get into it, but just for your information. So the things to remember, especially with play, is allow play into their musical lives in general. It's like a musical recess that's productive. Incorporate improv and record the sessions to allow the creative juices to flow. I know I keep saying this, but it's so important. Perhaps use techniques being used during lessons. Work on one at a time to give students a creative box that's not as daunting as free rein, which sometimes can be a little bit scary for some students. And finally, just a reminder with the MTNA competitions, one of the things that I got from Wynn and Rossi's presentation that really struck me was about the competitions. Are your students really ready? And it's actually sometimes more for advanced students or just ones that you truly believe are ready. Because just like performances, there's nothing more humiliating than being allowed to enter if you're not ready. Is the score neat? Are the ideas meaningful, flowing, cohesive? Is there tension and release, if applicable? Things like that. And the other thing that you have to be aware of are dates. So the dates for the composition is usually early September, so it's a little bit earlier than the competition itself. And so teachers are going to have to be making sure that they're gauging the school year with their students to make sure that their piece is ready. And especially since The scores have to be presented in a format created by notational software, which can sometimes be a hurdle, especially if they don't know how to use it. Students are required to input the notes themselves in the software. But there is help in the Valley there's lots of composers here that can actually help teach them how to use the software and how to get it down. And these are some of the names. The ones that are not in parentheses are the ones that they are most familiar with, and I think it's in your handout as well. So, yeah. Are there any questions? Oh, it's over there. Sorry. I had it on my...
Got an extra here.
Are there any other questions?
So I guess when you were asking us to create melody, it was interesting hearing everybody's sort of input. Like the first time you played it, it was no, it's wrong with this. And suddenly everybody gets a little more satisfied with
The result?
with the results. Yeah. And I guess I'm just curious, when you're composing, what does that relate to your composing? Like, do you write something and then go back and no, that doesn't sound right, do it this way? I guess I'm just curious about the process and maybe if you play it for, play things for other people and get their input and if you run out of ideas, toolbox, you know.
Yeah, so I actually went through that with Dr. Costers just in my last lesson. So I had been getting sick of the same harmonic progression that I was using, and so I decided to use a little bit more of extended harmonies. And for some reason, I knew something was working, but I just didn't feel, I was a little bit self-conscious about it. And so when I asked Dr. Costers, he's just like, actually, no, that's what we need more of. But the thing is that it's also a fine line between personal opinion and what you yourself want in your music as a composer. So you just have to be careful. But does that kind of go along?
Yeah, no, I was just curious because it was so fascinating to watch these people like, no, I don't want to be flat, I want to see sharp. Like, yeah.
Anybody else?
What are you working on now?
I am working on a piece, well, it's an electroacoustic bassoon piece, and then I also have one that is for 2 clarinets, bass clarinet, upright bass, piano, and voice. So it's kind of a weird ensemble, but it has like rich colors and stuff with the clarinets and stuff, so yeah.
I think this was said at the beginning, but I was just coming in, so did we talk about your NTNA entry and how you did nationally?
Oh, I mean, it was mentioned that I won an award, but
Was it third or?
it was third.
Nice.
Sometimes my students write a melody, and I have the same problem, because I like to compose, and I'm not sure whether I've heard that before. So they always say, I don't think that I've heard this, I think this is my original. And I don't know if there's any way to truly find out whether, I mean, obviously the whole piece wouldn't be from, you know.
That's also another fine line, and it's really, yeah. I mean, I feel like as a composer yourself, you have to be very wary about that. And if you, a lot of the times, like, if I felt like I have heard it before, I will be searching, I will be double checking, or I will be like, I don't want to go into that danger zone. Because there have been a couple people where I have run into them and they're just like, oh yeah, I wrote this and stuff. And they show it to me and I'm just like, that sounds exactly just like the other piece that I was listening to the other day. So I think you just have to be careful and just remember, like, if you feel like you have heard that somewhere, look into it or maybe try experimenting with the melody itself and maybe make it a little bit different, like make it your own if you feel like it's someone else's. I don't, yeah.
How do you double check? How do you look into it to make sure it's all the seeds of melodies out there that, where would you do?
I'm gonna be honest, I'm not sure how to answer that question, but I'm sorry.
How do you know when your pieces are done?
That is a great question. For myself personally, I really don't ever feel like they're done. Even the one, my horn piece that everyone knows somehow, I still don't feel like it's finished. I feel like there's always something more that you could do. It's kind of like piano playing as well, actually. All the time you feel like you're at a point where you can perform this piece, but is it really ready for yourself? And you know that, like, especially if you take that piece and you let it maybe sit on the back burner for a while and maybe bring it out later, it can always improve, especially since you're learning new things as you're going along. It's just like piano playing, and it's the same thing with composition. I feel like you can just continue improving, but it's up to you, I guess, whether or not you want to continue working on it.
I might have missed something that you shared because I was skiing, but I understand there are laws regarding just how many notes even can be similar to the themes. Do you know anything about that? Oh, to some other meaning?
Personally, no, actually, but yeah, and like I said, like I was mentioning, like, I mean, when I say experiment, I mean like it shouldn't sound, it's, yeah.
You can't copyright chord progressions.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah, that's a
have
different story.
the chord progression is 5'2".
Yeah, I mean, like,
Charleston are the same.
yeah.
The melodies, certainly, yeah.
Yeah, melody is definitely a different story. Because think about how many pieces that have 1, 4, 5, 1.
Yes, exactly. We were saying here how amazing it is, how many phenomenal themes and melodies there are across all genres of music, across hundreds of years, across, hundreds of cultures. And it's all different, and it's amazing. Think of Schubert, 600 art songs, and, it doesn't really duplicate. Think of Bach. Bach pretty much writes every piece. He starts with a 4-bar statement of 1, 4, 5, 1 of the key that he's in. And I challenge anyone to try to do something that's creative. I often say to our students, imagine if you walk in a cell, and you get 1, 4, 5, 1, you got to write something really creative with those. That's all the notes. It's pretty simple. But write a really catchy interplay between the hands. And every one of them are different. And every one of them is a gem.
And I feel like that's like one of the beauties of music too, is that it's like the exploration, even though we have hundreds and hundreds of years of music, it's still always, there's something new that we can do. And it's, I don't know, it's a neat process.
Are you surprised, or can you comment on, in some way, how you've written a piece and then you start to, let's say, interpret it, and you find that you're surprised how much there is?
Yes, I actually had one of those like, wow moments in Connecticut because I wrote a piece called El Anhelo for flute and guitar. And what I wrote, I felt like was, it's okay. But the way that they approached the piece and the way that they treated the piece and how important it was to them, the way that they incorporated the musicality, they brought out musicality that I didn't even know that I wrote, which is really, it's such a mind-blowing experience. And I can definitely say that that does happen. Yeah.
This is more personal. But do you think that composition and studying your own repertoire kind of
Absolutely. And that's actually something that I forgot to mention during the improv part. With improv, composition, and performing other repertoire of others, each one informs the other, and each one makes you get better. And it's just a super positive cycle, so absolutely. It does help with your performance of the pieces that you're working on, and it also helps with your composition because you're studying some of the greats. I mean, you're looking at Debussy, you're looking at Chopin, Beethoven, everybody, and it's all in front of you. And you could be using a lot of the techniques and just the things that they were using. It's a really cool thing to just, that's why I think it's super important and vital to actually be incorporating all of them.
So are you writing your ensemble piece for any group in particular?
Yeah, I actually got asked, and it was kind of free reign, so it's taken me, like for me, like I like a large box, but it's a box. It's nice to have a box sometimes. But the box that they gave me was the ensemble. And so I picked, what was it? a Sarah Teasdale poem. And from that, I've been writing the lyrics and having everything incorporate with it. But
Ranges for it.
I believe it's mezzo-soprano.
Yeah. And what's it called? Do you have a name yet?
I believe the poem is called I Would Live in Your Love, and so I might call it that, but I'm not sure yet. Yeah, it's still in process. So, yeah, sorry, I'll get to you. I actually usually don't write my titles until I have a storyline in my head. And so even when I have a storyline in my head, sometimes the title doesn't come. And so sometimes the piece will be completely finished before I choose a title. Because I actually sometimes even write poems to go with my storyline before I write the title. The title is kind of like the end product in a way. It's just like the stamp of like, this is what it's going to be.
Yeah. I noticed that you used finale in your composition. Have you taught Sibelius?
I've tried it a little bit, but because I didn't have the money to afford it, I actually had a debate for myself whether or not I was going to use Sibelius in finale, and a lot of the discussions that I had with everybody was finale just does more. Like it's a steeper learning curve compared to Sibelius, but it just apparently does more. But then on the other hand, people have said with Sibelius that it's really good for writing new music because you can kind of get away with things in the score and just being able to manipulate things into new music scores. So I have, but I've stuck with finale because I own it and it's been working really well for me. So
So, a couple of questions related to that. Are you saying that finale allows for that non-traditional notation to say new music?
yeah, I do have to say it's a little bit harder for myself because you have to go through a lot more steps to get there, but I feel like it can still do what Sibelius does. I think it's a lot of personal preference too, on the format that you would prefer to work in.
So, would you recommend finale for students just learning software?
So I wouldn't suggest anyone that you had to pay with first. I would suggest MuseScore. MuseScore is the free one that you can download. And especially when you're learning, it's nice to have a software, but since you're originally going to be writing by hand first anyways, that's kind of like the last thing that you kind of want to think about when you're writing a piece, when you're beginning. And so I would suggest MuseScore at first, and then as you get more advanced, then you can maybe upgrade to finale or Sibelius. But yeah. Anyone else? Well, thank you.